welcome back to the Heavy Debriefings podcast. You just got done hearing my interview with Scott Fogelbach of Bastard, talking about the brand new album Rotten Blood, which is available now through Distortion Music Group. Now that we got both interviews out of the way and we're over an hour into the show, why don't we get into 6 brand new album reviews, which of course, why don't we talk about the bands that I just got done interviewing? Starting off with Agathodaimon, and the brand new album 7 available now, and by now I mean this Friday, my apologies, but yes, coming out this Friday on Napalm Records. This is the first album in 9 years from the band and their first one since reuniting, and having a brand new lineup. It's a bit more progressive, it's a bit more free-ranged, but it's got that great black metal sound, that symphonic metal sound, it's got that great, heavy, goth, black feel that I love so much from the band. And much like we talked about, the band is not afraid to be able to experiment, whether it's playing more forward of the floor and letting the other members of the band shine, or going absolutely bonkers all over the fretboards or the drums. And it's so fantastic to hear it. I mean, this is easily the best Agathodaimon album to date. And I love the past 6 albums as well. They're a band a lot like Agathodaimon to me, where obviously they're from a different area. I mean, one's in the UK, one is in Germany, obviously, but they're both black metal, they're both gothic, but they both really like to experiment. And I love it when you can take a genre and you're able to turn it on its ear and just expand the sound. It's got that rubber band theory where you can expand the rubber band, and once you stop spreading it out, it will fold right back to where it was before. And that's such a great thing about Agathodaimon, because they know what the central core sound of the band is, but they will write longer songs now, they will write proggier songs now, they will write more straight-ahead songs now, they will write more brutal songs now. I mean, it's got a little bit of everything going on here, and it sounds cohesive at the same time. Like, if you listen to it, the track order makes absolutely so much sense, and that is for one very good reason, because it just flows together so very well. And I find that to be such an important thing. It needs to flow together. And I'm so glad that it does, because this is easily one of my favorite albums of the year so far, and of course we're only in mid-March right now, but it's going to be very, very interesting to see what's going to be happening down the road when it comes to the rest of 2022, because especially in the worlds of gothic and experimental black metal, Agathodaimon is going to be really hard to beat, and this album is just absolute perfection for that reason alone, let alone the production, the songwriting, and of course the musicianship that's going on here. Like, I wish they were big enough to come over here to the States and play. I doubt I'll ever get to see them in Minnesota, let alone the United States. But a boy can dream. A boy can dream. But seriously, do yourself a favor, check out this album. It is absolutely worth your time. And then of course, going in an opposite direction when it comes to blackened music, is the band Bastard with Rotten Blood, which is already available right now on Distortion Music Group. And much like I talked about, this is just good old-fashioned, thrashy black and roll. It's blackened rock and roll, a little bit of thrash to it, and a little bit more of that grotesque lyrical sound going on, which is so much appreciated in this sound. It's short, it's snappy, the songs are not overly progressive, they're not prog songs, they're not jazz-filled. I mean, it's just like straight ahead, heavy, thrash, black and roll. And when it comes to this style of music, I don't need anything else when it comes into this genre. It's much like the band Midnight that I talked about an episode or 2 ago, where, yeah, Bastard is not doing anything to reinvent the wheel, nor do they need to, because this album just covers so much ground, and is really an album that, sure, it took 6 years to be able to put this album out since the first album, but all that time was absolutely worth it because it really refined the sound. When you get the right members in the band to really be able to shine what the band can be about and add just the right amount of new influence to it, it makes for an amazing album. And I'm not the only one that's singing this praises. I've seen a lot of people talk about how great this album is. And the fact that I got to do an interview to be able to promote this album, no matter how big or small a band is, I am so happy to be able to promote good music. And Bastard is one of those bands. And if you just like some good old rock and roll infused black metal and thrash metal, go with Bastard. There's no way you could be disappointed. Now I'm serious about that. Now going back into a bit more of experimentation, but in a much different sound, with the band Dog Fashion Disco and their brand new album Cult Classic, which is also available now, but on Razor to Wrist. Now, Dog Fashion Disco is a band that has become easily one of my favorite bands of all time. Some people say they sound too much like Mr. Bungle. I say they're a little too mainstream to sound like Mr. Bungle. Just because you incorporate some brass instruments once in a while does not make you Mr. Bungle. And of course, I'm talking about everything that came before the Easter Bunny demo, which ironically was their first release, but also might be their last release. But that is just 100% pure thrash goodness, but the other Mr. Bungle releases are very much of that avant-garde experimental sound. And yes, Dog Fashion Disco does that, but they do it in such a way where every chorus is so catchy. The riffs can be so heavy and so hooky and so memorable, and there's no shortage of that on Cult Classic. It's very creepy at times, which I appreciate because if you look at songs that they've had in the past, it's always horror infused. And you wouldn't think that with a name like Dog Fashion Disco. The name might just turn you off if you've never heard of them before, but you really need to give them a chance. I swear, give them a chance. You won't be disappointed. And I keep saying that because all these albums, I don't think you really could be disappointed in, with the exception of maybe the next one, but that's going to be a bit of a controversial one anyways. So let me praise a little bit more about Dog Fashion Disco here. It's short, it's sweet, it's 9 songs, absolutely no filler whatsoever. Whether it's getting creepy with the piano, whether it gets a little bit ska-ish with the brass section, a little bit jazzy, or it just hits in those Slayer riffs when they get a little thrashy and more heavy metal. And of course, you infuse all of the great horror-infused lyrics that are just done so amazingly well. You get the recipe for one of the most innovative and original bands out there right now. And Dog Fashion Disco has such a great array in their discography that it's really hard to say what album you should check out first to see what you're into. My personal favorite album is always going to be Adultery. Not just because it was the first album that got me into them, but I love the fact that it's a concept album. I love how everything flows together so very well on that album. I think it is the best case for how track listing can be done in this style because it flows together because of that concept. But Cult Classic is no slouch when it comes to that. From start to finish, all 9 songs, it's absolutely all killer from start to finish. It is such a great album. And if you want to explore more of that avant-garde experimental sound, but you want it to sound just mainstream enough to where you get those catchy, memorable hooks, Dog Fashion Disco is the band for you. And I can't recommend or praise Dog Fashion Disco enough. Such an amazing band. Now comes the most controversial part of the show. Yes, I have to be talking about this one. It just came out this past Friday on Loma Vista, which you may not be familiar with the label, but you sure as fuck are familiar with the band. Whether you want to be or not, there is a brand new album from the band Ghost named Impera. And I fucking love this album. I fucking love it. Now, it took me a few lessons to really be able to appreciate this album. I found the singles on the album to be very fun, very memorable. Like Hunter's Moon, which was a song that was contributed to the Halloween Kills soundtrack, of course being on this album as well. You got Call Me Little Sunshine, which might be the most standout song on the album when it comes to singles. And you got the song, which is probably the most controversial of all of them, because there's some songs on here that have like a very 80s Queen meets Rush vibe. There's ones that have that 80s hair ballad sound. There's some that have that classic Ghost sound that you know and either love or hate. I will say this is not an album that sounds like everything else. They definitely changed things up here and it does sound more 80s, which I'm not against. But there is one song in particular, the song 20s. When I first heard the song, I fucking hated it. I fucking hated the song so fucking much. But it grew on me. It grew on me a lot. Once I really started to dissect the lyrics and realized how tongue-in-cheek they are, when I listened to the music, it was the very first song I heard from Ghost that featured any kind of double bass. And this is the first album that features double bass in any way. I remember seeing Ghost at a very small venue in St. Paul, Minnesota called Station 4, which is no longer with us, back in 2012. It was in, 2012, January 2012. I remember that because the next morning I woke up and I found out I had 2 weeks to move, but that's a different story for a different time. And I actually took a piss next to Papa because there's only one men's bathroom in the whole venue. It was right after the show. He took a piss right next to me. I told him what a great job he did. And of course he said, "Thank you, motherfucker." Which, going back in the 20s, I find that very apropos. But going back into 20s, I'm able to appreciate it now because of, like I said, the tongue-in-cheek lyrics that's going on there that fits very well with the world that we live in right now. It is such a smart-ass song. And I think I finally figured out how to describe this song. It is Faith No More meets Oingo Boingo meets the orchestral side of Danny Elfman's soundtrack music. In other words, it's fucking bonkers. If you're checking out the band for the very first time, and unless you're really into that combination that I described, you're gonna hate this song, just like I did. But it is an earworm. It will get stuck in your head, and you might start to appreciate it more. Or you might be like a lot of other people, the gatekeepers of rock and metal, who talk about how shitty Ghost is, even though they discovered them on the second or third album. And I keep hearing all of these different things, like they're the new Nickelback. They're Nickelback with Scooby-Doo riffs. They're Scooby-Doo metal. To me, they're an occult rock band, and I fucking love that there's an occult rock band that can headline arenas now. Like I said, back in 2012, I saw them on their very first headlining tour of America at a venue that held like 800 people max, and I don't even think it really held that much. It was well under 1,000. But just knowing that a band that can go from being a headlining band at Maryland Death Fest to playing a very, very small venue in St. Paul, Minnesota, to opening for Maiden just a few years later at the Xcel Energy Center, which is where the Minnesota Wild plays for hockey, to a few years later even playing the biggest arena in Minnesota at the Target Center, which is where they have the Timberwolves, and that's where Metallica plays, that's where Tool plays, like all of the big arena rock bands, and basically any arena show you can think of almost always goes to the Target Center, and Ghost headlined it. And I remember saying back in 2012, 2013 to my friends, who some of them aren't my friends anymore, some of them I'm still friends with, but I remember saying all the way back then, after I saw Ghost, they will be the next arena rock band. And they all laughed at me. Y'all laughed at me. But look who got the final laugh. Papa and company. Because they get to do arena shows, and whether you love the band or you think they suck, they're making all of that moolah. Again, going back into the song 20s. And again, I promise not to put that on the soundtrack to the show this week. I'll pick a different Ghost song. But the fact that they have grown so much and became one of the most notorious bands in rock and roll right now. Again, whether you love them, you hate them, you're indifferent to them, you gotta respect a band that can be so tiny and such a niche sound of that Merciful Fate meets Blue Oyster Cult sound from the beginning and transforming them into what they are now. Almost no other band could do that, especially when your lyrics are either tongue-in-cheek or real into the words of Satan and satanic lyrics. Bands just don't do that anymore. But Ghost proved that to be an exception. They are an outlier to the rule, but they are still that exception to the rule. And I'm so happy for the band. And I love this album. I will not say it's my favorite. I would probably say it's in the middle of their catalog for me. I still love the first album. I love the third album. The second and fourth is a toss-up, so this fifth album I would say is right in the middle for me right now. But it just came out on Fridays, so that could absolutely change. Just like the band Ghost has changed. Every single Ghost album is so different from one another, and I love them for that. And they took out a band like Twin Temple out to open for them. You know how fucking cool that is? A doo-wop satanic band. They got to play arenas, which they might not ever be able to do that again unless they're an opening slot or Ghost brings them on tour every time, because doo-wop is one of the lowest ranked genres of listenability, especially in today's day and age, but Ghost gave them that spotlight. Incredible. Volbeat was on there, but I don't talk about Volbeats anymore. But this album from Ghost, Tempera, I recommend it. It's a grower of an album. I don't think you're gonna love it on the first listen all the way through, but the more subsequent listens that you give it, you're gonna be able to appreciate it so much more. And yeah, I probably will go on record saying this will be on my top 100 list come the end of the year, and I don't even see that being a question. Some might laugh at me and, you know, all the different shit that people say about Ghost. I don't fucking care. Ghost makes music for me. They've done it 5 times in a row now with 5 studio albums. They haven't disappointed me yet. Until they start making music that doesn't do anything for me anymore, I have no reason not to support Ghost in any way that I can. And anyone representing Ghost, I would really love to do an interview, so please, let's make that happen. Thank you. 2 albums left here, and let's talk about a band that you are not familiar with, that you need to be. A band known as Threads of Fate, and their sophomore album, In the Cold Embrace of Light, is out now through Layered Reality Productions. And I meant to say sophomore release, because their very first release was an EP. This is their very first album, and it's everything that I've wanted from the band. It's been several years since the Threads of Fate EP was released, and in 2022, this is just the dark, symphonic, progressive, extreme, epic metal album that I've wanted. Now, that might be a lot of different subgenres to you, but I can try to put it in more simpler terms. It is a very dark metal album that really embraces the orchestral soundtrack, cinematic sounds, and that can be done almost 100% because of amazing multi-instrumentalist Vikram Shankar and his ability to write some of the most amazing orchestration you will ever fucking hear. And this is the second album this year that he's released, and I know there's going to be more come the end of the year, but just seeing what he's doing here, what he does in the band Redemption, what he does with Lux Terminus, and of course what he's done just last month with Silent Skies. I love what he does. And of course all the other work that he does as well too, like I'll just forget everything that he does. But Vikram Shankar just knows how to write music. He knows how to orchestrate it in a way that feels so cinematic and so catchy at the same time. And of course, he's not even the main star of the show. Arguably, lead singer John Pyers is the star of the show here with his vocal ability, because not only can he soar to the heavens, he can growl like a motherfucker. He's got an impeccable range. It's not for everyone, but it's an incredible range. Whether you're looking for something that has that orchestral sound of, say, Serenia, let's say, and then it goes into the depths of hell of something like Dimmu Borgir or Cradle of Filth. John Byers can hit all of those different levels. And musically, you know, it can sound like Evergrey, it can sound like Dimmu Borgir, it can sound like an ambient soundtrack. It's got everything on there. And even though it sounds like it might be a little too much cooks in the kitchen when it comes to genres, it is done in such a way where everything just seems so seamless. It was meant to be this way, and it comes off sounding so natural at the same time. Now, with this being the first full album from Threads of Fate, I know the band's only going to get stronger from here, and if this is what they're doing now, where they can write something with like that commercial, emotional, alternative rock that can go into black metal, that can go into orchestral cinematic music, all rolled into one, this is a band that if they stand the test of time, they're going to demolish that test of time and put out some of the greatest records we're going to hear in the 2020s and beyond. So get on the hype train along with me here with In the Cold Embrace of Light. This is an album that if you enjoy the dark side of life, will be right up your alley. If you're looking for that symphonic, vampiric, emotional, orchestral sound, if you're looking for that black metal meets orchestral, meets symphonic, meets alternative, meets progressive, meets epic, doomy heavy metal, all of it put into one big commercial sounding, catchy as hell album pot, Threads of Fate is the band for you. And finally, for my reviews this week, we're going in the absolute polar opposite of every single band I just got done talking about here with the band Troglodyte, with easily one of the longest and hardest to say album titles that I've had to do in quite some time, whether it's in the written word, the typed word, or just coming from my voice. the hierarchical ecological succession. Welcome to the food chain. And that came out a few weeks back on Blood Blast Productions. Now, I can easily say that this is a big, dumb, fun metal album. With it being caveman, troglodyte, and very much Sasquatch/Bigfoot inspired. It's full of caveman riffs, it is death metal, it is grindy, it is so short, it's under a half hour, but it's a full album. Midway through the album, there's one little skit that takes away from demolishing you into a belly laugh after belly laugh, if you're into that style, and then right back into the brutality. This sounds like the kind of music that Sasquatch and Bigfoot, and anyone that's inspired by any of them. Like, if you believe in Sasquatch and Bigfoot, this would be the kind of band you would want to make. And it's just full of those stupid, dumb caveman riffs that are not hard to play, but they're so much fucking fun to listen to. The drums, of course, are blast beats, double bass filled, and of course that's going to come with the territory, but it just sounds like you're getting pummeled with every single song. And it feels like you're getting torn apart by troglodytes. Yeah, I mean, if you're just looking for a stupid fun album, and that's what Troglodyte is in a nutshell, a stupid fun band. Every single album has this great kind of concept going on. Every single album cover, and including this one, which might be my favorite that they've done, is just like so brutal. And it's just, you can tell what you're getting into. It's kind of like watching a B or C grade horror movie. And this is the soundtrack that you hear to it. If that sounds fun to you, I absolutely recommend checking out Troglodyte. This album is under a half hour, so you have no reason not to check this album out. It's short, sweet, funny in the middle, and before and after, you get brutalized. You can't have much more fun than that. And that does it for my album reviews for this week. If you're just checking out the video up on YouTube, I thank you very much for doing so. I know the YouTube videos are not getting as much attention as other things, which sucks. And the overall podcast on YouTube is not doing anywhere near as well as it does on actual podcast apps and networks. Not much I can really do about that, but if you do use YouTube and you do check out those things, they do get numbers. Not the numbers I wish, but they do get numbers, and if you do check this out on YouTube, I thank you very much. I still plan on keep on doing this because I like being able to just use my actual voice rather than having to write all the time. And of course, we got, I believe next week, might be the following week, where we got the best of March albums coming up, which of course will be in the written form on thatdrummerguy.com. So be sure to check that out if you like the written word. Otherwise, again, thank you very much for checking out these album reviews.